Good morning, everybody. I apologize in advance. It's a bit of a dry subject. I can't spice it up with a lot of x-rays that show these terrible deformities and ankylosed joints and the wonderful outcomes. I must say, coming from the U.S., I'm always amazed by what I see here, sometimes from some of the surgeons here. They do wonderful work. We just don't see that in the U.S., so I thank you for inviting me. I always learn a lot when I'm here. It's quite interesting. But this is an important thing. It's a dry subject, but it's important. So new designs, when do we jump in? Because there's a lot of new designs. And innovative techniques and designs are becoming necessary. We're just talking about all the robotics. And some of the reason we're doing that is to meet the demands of increasingly younger and more active patients. And there's a lot of pressure from surgeons and the patients for implants to last longer and have better function than previous designs. So in response to that pressure, the companies are developing new technologies at a rapid pace. And kind of the quintessential example of new technology that's been life-changing is, Sir John Charnley and the low-friction arthroplasty. Think how many millions of people have been helped over the last, 60 years from that. It's just incalculable. What a tremendous piece of technology. But unfortunately, the evolution of medical technology parallels evolutionary biology, which means some new devices prove to be inferior or ineffective. And the pressure to innovate has introduced some new risks because we can adopt these devices in a widespread fashion, but we really don't know the unexpected complications or technical issues yet because, unfortunately, the longevity of orthopedic prostheses is measured in decades. So there's a lot of unknown modes of failure that may not become apparent for years after implantation. And in the least, that might lead to waste of valuable resources, and at the worst, negatively impact patient outcomes and cause patient harm. So the root of the problem, or that's really the root of the problem with our new technology, we just don't know what's going to happen 20 years down the line. So the question becomes, how can we implement this new technology and these new designs in a safe, reasonable time frame, but still maintain an environment that allows for continuing surgical innovation? Well, we could say that we would use evidence-based medicine for all of our new implants, and that all these implants require multiple controlled clinical trials. The pharmaceutical industry basically has to do that. The problem is it takes them an average of 9 years and $800 million to get a new drug on the market, and that's really not feasible in the implant industry. So many patients would miss out on this improved technology for many years, and the company's desire to innovate would be stymied by the tremendous investment cost and the long return on the investment. It's just financially unacceptable for them. And even these really specific controlled trials are not immune to post-approval complications. Because of that, currently less than 1% of medical devices in the U.S. are approved via this pathway. So we have another path called the 510K process, and Australia and Europe have similar, I believe. But basically all you have to do is show equivalence to an existing device. And if you can do that, you can market your device. But the 510K process doesn't really specifically evaluate safety or effectiveness. And so these new implants can come out on the market to the entire community, but they don't really require any new training or experience with the device. But this is the most common pathway in the U.S. But what happens is you get widespread adoption of a new implant, and it's based primarily on in vitro testing, not clinical testing. So it's obviously not a perfect process. And there's a long list of failed new technologies that we all know about that have come down that pathway. So beware. In Australia, the European Union, we have a Therapeutic Goods Administration and the European Commission, so you get a conformity certificate or a CE mark. But you guys still have Class 3 devices as well, and those are the devices with the highest risk to the patient, and those require clinical data. So the timeline for all of those may take years. So we need an alternative pathway. We need something that bridges the gap between these long clinical trials and this 510K process. It's not quite perfect. So I would suggest we have a graduated implant introduction. We'd have a streamlined approval process, but those implants would go to specialized centers, both private and academic, where there are high-volume surgeons and experienced surgeons, and where they have the ability to collect data and analyze that data. And then we let these early evaluators report, and that allows a collection of clinical outcomes on a reasonable volume of patients, and we can identify early problems in design and instrumentation, and then you can improve those problematic design factors early on. So the advantages of that are many. There's advantages to the manufacturers. They avoid this huge financial investment of these pre-market approval trials. Implants are evaluated by experienced surgeons, and you can optimize them prior to the widespread dissemination. And that can maybe lead to avoiding recall or withdrawal of poor designs. And those are tremendously expensive. Just ask DePuy these days how much they've spent on metal and where that's going to lead them. From the surgeon standpoint, you get reliable data, and we know now the optimized techniques and instrumentation. And for patients, at least some could get timely access to the new technology, but there'd be a decreased risk of adverse outcomes and harm to the majority of patients. So the devil's in the details, though. What implants would you include? If it's a brand new system, that makes sense. But if you just make a moderate change, what if you just change your bearing or you make a different head size? Does that have to go through this process? What centers do you choose, and how long before you release it to the public? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? What's the right time frame? We don't know. So we can use some general principles about when we adopt these designs because we don't have a perfect process. And even the pre-market clinical trials that take forever can't eliminate all possible unforeseen problems with an implant. And there's a wide spectrum of new designs. You can have a minor change in a proven implant, or you can have a brand new implant in a brand new procedure. That requires different scrutiny. Beware of the minor changes in the proven implant. That's a wolf in sheep's clothing. We can have a very successful implant. You change one thing, and all of a sudden it's failing. So if you have something like a minor modification of a pre-existing device, that's lower risk. If you have a new device in an existing procedure, maybe that's moderate. But if you have a new procedure and a new device, I think that requires a high level of scrutiny before you adopt it. And there's other things you can think about. If we have a technology that now addresses a solution that we had no effective solution for previously, well, you might tolerate higher risk. If it's something that requires retraining or certification, assess that very carefully prior to adoption. And if it's a brand new treatment, a novel method of treatment of a condition or a new method of treatment where we didn't have a previous treatment, that's really a major development in technology. So look at that very closely. And ask the right questions. Does the design improve clinical care or outcome for my patient? That's most important. If the answer is no, don't go there. Why would we even look at it if it's not going to improve our patient's care and outcome? If the answer is yes, then it's a matter of how much risk are you willing to take. If it's game-changing, you might be willing to adopt earlier. If it's a small difference, I think you should wait. How much does it cost? The implant company makes something better, or are they just making something that they can make more money off of? And what about testing? We should all be engineers to some degree. We live in a mechanical world. We're putting mechanical implants in patients they wear. So we should have a knowledge of how these things are tested. Did they test fatigue, corrosion, taper testing? How about wear testing? And how was it tested? Does it compare to established methods? Do the results compare to prior proven and well-functioning implants? How much clinical follow-up does the new implant have, if any? And do you have any peer-reviewed articles, not just white papers that are written and produced by the company? So in summary, use all the tools at your disposal. Use evidence-based medicine if it's available. How was that implant improved? If it was a clinical trial versus a substantially equivalent pathway, that's a big difference. Does it actually have the potential to help my patient? Is it completely new and unproven design, or is it a minor change? Is it game-changing or minimal impact? And has appropriate testing been performed? Satisfy yourself that it has. And always look at cost versus benefit, not just with new implants, but new processes, robotics, patient-specific cutting blocks, etc. So if the risk to the patient is high, I would say wait for the early evaluators and adopters. Let them report on their results. Let them lay the foundation in terms of clinical experience. And that can somewhat facilitate the diffusion of these new designs and technology into general use. I would continue to use the clinically proven implants that have excellent clinical results. And I think avoid the surgeon down the street is doing it, so I better do it philosophy. That can lead to problems for both you and your patient. And so in general, I think the majority of surgeons should be part of a later group to adopt new designs and technology. Wait until there's substantial evidence regarding the results of a new design, and that will save not only you, most importantly your patient, from less than optimal results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk Kindsfater.